The news again coming in moments ago, Kevin Durant heading to the Golden State Warriors.
What? He signed with the Warriors! Why would he do that? He already had a good team! Who allowed this? That's like 6 superstars on one team! They the Justice League!
In the offseason of 2016, Kevin Durant shocked the world by signing with the Golden State Warriors. Just like that, a team that just broke the record for the most regular season wins just added a top 3 player in the league and were by far the favorites to win the championship, in which they would do in the upcoming season. Now, while the NBA didn't veto this move like what they did with the Chris Paul trade back in 2012, what they did do is enact a new rule in the CBA. A rule that was supposed to favor small market teams by giving them a systematic edge compared to other teams when it comes to re-signing players that they drafted going into free agency. And this rule was called the Kevin Durant rule, otherwise known as the Supermax contract. And today, I'm going to explain to you guys why this rule has quite frankly failed. Before we get going, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Look, man, it is 2021. A new year is upon us. Let's start off the year strong, man, and let's try to get this video to 6,000 likes. If we can get to that point, that would be amazing. But with that being said, let's first ask the question, what exactly is a Supermax contract? The Supermax rule, officially known as the Designated Veteran Player Extension, was a part of the 2017 CBA that the NBA made as a direct action against Kevin Durant signing with the Golden State Warriors, along with the general problem of players leaving the teams that drafted them in free agency, especially the past couple of years. The NBA believed that this was a rule that was going to favor small market teams to be able to re-sign their star players instead of leaving them for another team who has a bigger market and is able to offer them the exact same money. More specifically, the NBA thought that it was a problem that every single team that offered KD a contract offered the same initial salary of $26.5 million. And OKC really had no edge in any way, despite being the team that drafted Kevin Durant and quite frankly did contribute a lot in his development as a player in this league. Now let's get into a little bit more of the logistics when it comes to the Supermax contract. For a player to qualify for the Supermax, the player must be entering their 8th or 9th season in the NBA and has either made any of the All-NBA teams the season prior or 2 of the previous 3, won the Defensive Player of the Year award the season prior or again 2 of the previous 3, or has been an MVP in at least one of the last previous 3 seasons. Now, for a team to even qualify to offer the Supermax, the team must have originally drafted the player or got them in a trade while they were still on their rookie contract. The Supermax contract in itself allows teams to offer up anywhere from 30 to 35% of their salary cap to one player for a max of a 5-year contract. This is the same contract that's allowed players like Steph Curry, John Wall, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Giannis Antetokounmpo to get the exuberant deals that they have right now. Now, the main purpose of the Supermax was to entice free agents to stay with their teams. And to be brutally honest, this has just failed in so many fronts, it's insane. And while I am for the players, and man does the Supermax benefit players like crazy, but for franchises around the league, the Supermax has been a huge fail due to 2 main reasons. Number 1, it hasn't had a dramatic effect on how free agents make their decisions, and number 2, it has, if anything, swayed teams to trade their players away. So let's start with the first point. Ever since this rule has been introduced, 2 of the biggest examples of when this rule would have come in handy has been a failure. Number 1 was Kawhi Leonard. You know, before Kawhi Leonard was a Clipper and a Raptor, he was a San Antonio Spur, and it feels like forever, but he was. And with all the turmoil he had in San Antonio, Kawhi Leonard chose to pass up on a $200 million Supermax extension and instead demanded to be traded in the final year of his contract and signed with the Clippers for a 3-year, $103 million contract instead. That's nearly half of what he could have got if he stayed in San Antonio, and he passed it up. Now, Kawhi never publicly denied a Supermax contract from the Spurs, but from the looks of it, the Supermax wasn't even a factor in his decision, which is not good when it comes to how effective this rule really is. The second example is Anthony Davis, who was actually offered a Supermax contract and publicly declined it and still went on to request a trade to the Lakers, which made him ineligible for a Supermax contract. Now, obviously, there hasn't been all failures. There have been players that have signed to a Supermax deal, those being the likes of Steph Curry, John Wall, Russell Westbrook. But if we're being honest, these are cases that whether there was a Supermax or not, these players were gonna re-sign with their teams one way or another. But when it came to players that were a little bit more up in the air, the lure of a Supermax truly has not been enticing enough, and it's very clear that players will still prioritize signing in bigger markets and being put in winning situations rather than taking a Supermax deal. Now you might be saying, B Souls, what about Giannis? Didn't he just sign a Supermax deal? Yes he did. But Giannis re-signing with the Bucks, while yes, money did play a part in it, the bigger part of it was the fact that the Bucks have shown to be a very competent organization that's willing to give Giannis what he wants and is trying to win with Giannis at the helm. Again, this goes back to my previous point. Even if there was no Supermax contract to be given out, while it is debatable, I truly think that Giannis still would have re-signed with the Bucks given the reasons that he said publicly. But also with brand and sponsorship deals being as crazy as they are, I think most players at this point are smart enough to realize that A, they are still going to get a crazy amount of money signing elsewhere, and B, there's so many ways for them to make money through other means that once you get to a status where Supermax contracts are even being discussed, the difference in your lifestyle from making 40 million a year to 25, 30 mil a year is quite frankly negligible in the grand scheme of things. But then let's talk about the second point, because not only is the Supermax not as enticing as it really seems to players, but from a team perspective, because of how the NBA market is and how much they know players will ask for, teams in the past have straight up traded their star players or fully refused to hand out Supermax contracts because the player just isn't worth that investment. That was a big reason why the Kings traded Boogie Cousins. That was the reason why the Bulls traded Jimmy Butler. And that is the main reason why the Hornets were not able to re-sign Kemba Walker, because they didn't even offer Kemba Walker a Supermax deal, even though they wanted him back. And quite frankly, I don't blame them. And I also don't blame Kemba Walker for leaving the Hornets because they didn't offer him a Supermax contract. Because in this market, Kemba Walker is worth a Supermax contract. And let's just keep it a buck, let's keep it a bean. If this Supermax rule, the Kevin Durant rule, was in place when KD was in free agency in 2016, it wouldn't have changed anything for all the reasons I just said. Because at the end of the day, Kevin Durant wanted to leave the Thunder for reasons outside of money, because quite frankly, when you're eligible for a Supermax, money will not be a problem. It won't. All the Supermax really did was increase how much players will get paid, which again, I want to emphasize is great, because at the root of the league is the players. There is no product without the players. But if the goal of the Supermax was to give teams an edge when re-signing their homegrown star players, it quite frankly has failed in doing so. The people who took the Supermax, they were going to re-sign with or without that rule in place. And the people who wanted to leave, the Supermax deal did not make that much of a difference to them. All it's really done is force teams to overpay for their star players when they probably didn't even have to, which in turn handicaps their front offices, and then 3 years into that contract, when they're unable to build a contending roster around that star player because of said Supermax deal and how it crippled the team's salary cap, or the player just simply isn't that good to be being paid that much, that player, although there's still 2 years left on his contract, can go to the front office and say, look, I can be a locker room cancer for the next 2 years, or you can trade me right now while my value is high, or you can trade me next year when my value is lower and people know that I'm gonna leave in free agency, or I can decline my player option and I can walk away with you guys getting nothing in return from me. And if all that applies for the Supermax, then everything I just said also applies to regular max deals as well. The idea that a player is truly committed to a team for more than 2 years and vice versa is simply dead with the new rules in place. Whether that's a problem or not is not the topic of this video, but there is no denying that the idea of max contracts in the modern NBA, whether that be regular max deals or super max deals, has been a failure. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Happy New Year's to everyone. 2021 is gonna go crazy. But with that being said, I'm out. Peace.